Welcome to Carlton's Math Corner. Today we are going to continue our study on integers. At this time, let's put a smile on our face and take out your math journal as well as something to write with and your vocabulary packet. Today we are going to be learning how to subtract integers. So remember in the last video we talked about integers, and we talked about how they're whole numbers and their opposites. Well, today we are going to hike along a number line and learn how to subtract integers. And so I have my hiker here, and she's going to help us out. We are going to move along the number line, and I want you to make some observations as she moves along the number line. I want you to see if you can figure out the rules for subtracting integers. So let's start off with -3 minus 2. So she's going to start at -3 over here, which is to the left of 0. And since all of these problems are subtraction problems, subtraction means she will always face the negatives. Okay? In the last video, they were all addition problems, so Nemo always faced the positives. And so this one's a little bit different. So she's always going to face the negatives. So she's at -3, she's facing the negatives, and then this is a +2. So that means she's going to move forward too. Whenever it's positive, she goes forward. If it's negative, she goes backwards. So she's going to move forward too. 1, 2. And so look at the number that she lands on. She landed on -5. So -3 minus 2 is -5. Let's do another one. So she's at +4, so over here. She's at +4. She's facing the negatives. And then this says -1. So that means she's got to go backwards 1. And look where she lands. She landed at +5. Okay, let's do another one. She started at -1. She's facing the negatives. It's a subtraction problem. And this is a +5. So that means she moves forward 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And she landed at -6. Okay, so what do you notice? How did the hiker go from -3, subtract 2, and get -5? How did she start at +4, subtract a -1, and get to a +5? Or start at -1, subtract 5, and get a -6? How is she making this happen? Well, here are some observations that I noticed. Okay? I noticed that when she subtracted a positive number, okay, so she started at -3, she subtracted 2, I noticed that she went further into the negatives. So she went further left. Then when she subtracted a negative number, I noticed that she actually ended up going further into the positives. It is so weird because I would think if she subtracts a positive, she would go further positive. And if she subtracts a negative, she would go further negative. But it's the opposite. That's what I noticed. The other thing I noticed is that this number was always her starting point. And so with those observations, so again, here's what I notice, and I'm going to also add that the beginning number was her starting point. Okay, so these are my observations, and we are going to talk about this, because if she subtracts a positive and gets further negative, and then she subtracts a negative and she gets further positive, it's going opposite. And the reason for that is because when we subtract, we truly are adding additional negatives. That's what we're doing every time. And so what happens is when I am adding additional negatives, what I am doing is I am really adding a negative 2. So like here, this is minus a positive 2. Well, that is the same as adding a negative 2, because I'm going further into the negatives when I subtract a positive number. And so the opposite is true, is it when I have minus a negative 7. Well, this is already negative, so if I add additional negatives, what happens is this turns positive. So I'm adding really some more positives, and that's why it's going into the positives. And so the easiest way to remember subtraction, because oh my gosh, all that sounds so confusing, because even to myself it sounds confusing. The easiest way for me to remember on how to subtract is to keep this saying in my mind: keep, change, opposite. Keep, change, opposite. Because what we are doing when we are setting up a subtraction problem is really we are setting up an addition problem. I know that sounds so weird, but we are, because we're adding additional negatives. And so what we're going to do is in our problems, every time we have a subtraction problem, we're going to change it. So we're going to keep the first number because that's our starting point. Change, meaning subtraction will always be changed to addition because we're adding negatives. So it's always changed to addition. So keep, change, opposite means if it's a positive number, we're going to change it to its opposite, which is negative number. So this is positive 2, negative 2. Always opposite. And then notice it just creates a new problem for us, and it's an addition problem. And so we need to use our rules. From the last video, we learned that a negative plus a negative equals a negative, and all we have to do is add those numbers together. 4 plus 2 is 6, so the answer is negative 6. So negative 4 minus 2 is negative 6. Over here, keep, change, so now it's positive, and then opposite. Opposite of negative 7 is positive 7, so we change it to its opposite. So now this is the new problem, negative 5 plus 7, and we learned in the last video that if there's a negative and there's a positive, then all we do is subtract them. 7 minus 5 is 2, and then we take the sign of the number that's further from 0. Well, 7 is further from 0, and that is positive, so our answer is positive 2. Let's try this problem together. So we keep the 1, the negative 1. Okay, that's our starting point. Change to positive, and then if this number is positive, it goes to its opposite, which is negative. And so now we have negative 1 plus negative 3, which is negative 4. Exactly. Okay, so for tomorrow, I would like for you to try these 4 problems, only 4. Please do not use a calculator. I want you to try them on your own and see if you get the answers that I get. Thank you so much for joining me at Carlton's Math Corner, and I look forward to meeting with you again.